What's up, everybody? Let me go check it on Facebook to see if we are live before I bring my guest up today, which is Eric Buchanan here of By and For the People. This is a conversation about headlines and opinions where Eric and I will bring different topics to the bear, and then we talk. Sometimes we push back on each other. Sometimes we agree. Let's see what we sound like. Yep, we sound pretty good. There we go. Now I'm about to bring Eric up. He's going to tell us who he is and what he does. Today we're going to be talking about, yes, of course, the story of the year and for several years now is going to be the ongoing conflict in Iran that has begun about 3 or 4 days ago. I just did a pretty good podcast on this with my buddy Jeff Styles at thejeffstyles.com. You can go listen to it in a little bit. I'm still in the process of getting it pushed out. And then, of course, Eric and I are going to touch on that. And then Gavin Newsom, he's saying some interesting stuff. We'll have our take on that. And you never know other things that I will do to sidetrack my buddy Eric Buchanan, who his job is to keep me between the rails. We're going to bring him up, and then he can tell us who he is and what he does. Eric, buddy, you're going to come up, man, in 3, 2, 1. How you doing now?
Hey, Clint, how are you?
I'm good. Tell everybody who you are and what you do. And then we're going to make some podcast magic today.
Yeah, so hi, everybody. My name is Eric Buchanan. Very quick commercial for this podcast. Clint's got to get paid somehow. Eric Buchanan Associates is the sponsor of this law firm. We help people all over the United States who've been denied long-term disability or individual disability insurance benefits. If you know anyone who's been denied long-term disability or individual disability insurance benefits, if the insurance company is not giving them the right answer, not paying their benefits, taking their time, not paying on time, not paying the right amount, please reach out to us at buchanandisability.com to see if we can help. We help people all over the U.S. We're not licensed in every state. We work with local attorneys in states where we're not licensed or we otherwise follow the local rules. We have 6 attorneys. We've had clients in 48 states so far. Trying to get those last 2 New England
Hey, Eric,
states.
I'm going to let you keep talking. I'll be right back. Keep doing that.
Those last 2 New England states that we don't have yet. So if you know anybody anywhere that needs help with long-term disability, please reach out to us. We also help whether the policy falls under ERISA or not, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. We also help if it's a life insurance case, if it's a long-term care case, or a large health insurance claim. Those are the type of cases we handle. So please reach out to us once again on the World Wide Web at buchanandisability.com. Very quickly about me, I was a history major at the Virginia Military Institute. After that, I went to the Navy for 5 years. I served right at the end of the Cold War, flying P-3s, chasing originally Soviet submarines, and then by the end of my service, they were Russian submarines. I also did some service off the coast of Bosnia that were technically combat operations, but not compared to some of the stuff people are going through today. After that, I went to law school at W&L for 3 years, where I paid a special attention to constitutional law. I also paid a lot of attention to administrative law because I knew what I'd be doing for a living. And then after I got out, I went to work for my dad doing Social Security disability cases. Along the way, started having clients who had long-term disability insurance claims in addition to their Social Security. I didn't know anybody else doing those cases. We figured out, and now that's primarily what we do. We have one attorney that we're associated with who does Social Security cases, but the rest is long-term disability. And Clint, I just want to back to today's topic, one thing to kind of connect all this together. When I was in high school here in Chattanooga, we had a high school classmate, and I don't know if she would want me to say her name out loud. I'm friends with her today on Facebook. She was really fun in high school. She was kind of almost like just a normal high school kid that we were friends with.
Okay.
But she was a refugee whose dad was highly involved in the government of the Shah. If I told you what he did, it would give away exactly who I'm talking about. But they were people that got out during the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And probably in 83 or 84, he came and gave a lecture at one of our classes in high school. And it was like the first time a bunch of high school kids started learning about what really Iran was about, the history of it being Persian, the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims, and the idea that Iran was had been taken over by this different type of Islam, and that there was actually sort of a war in the Middle East that was going to eventually develop between the different types of Islam. And he predicted a lot of stuff that we saw over the next few years. But he'd been a high official under the Shah. In fact, his daughter, the one who was my high school classmate, eventually, as we got to know her well enough, admitted that she'd had dinner when she was a young girl with the Shah. that kind of stuff. And so there is a connection that I have that makes me very sympathetic to the idea that um, the Islamic totalitarian government of Iran is very, very bad. And my friend and people like her that are part of the diaspora, the people who got out of Iran to live around the world, would love to get back to a free country and have a
Well,
free Iran. But there's lots of other reasons why it'd be nice to have an Iran that was
well,
not.
let's start off with this real quick. I'll give my anecdotal take on this. Not take my um, I'm going to refer people to a podcast, Patrick Bet Davis, PBD podcast on Spotify. I like him. His family came from Iran. He grew up in Iran until he was a kid, I think in elementary school. And then, he's a veteran. He's got his great podcast. He's an entrepreneur. He's very successful. But Saturday they released a podcast, and he has this one guy on named Tom, who's a financial guy. I really like his take. It's very calm. He's got two guys on that make me look calm and I think sometimes unemotional, which they get on my nerves. So I probably get on other people's nerves if that's the case. But he gave a really good personal view. He remembers his dad, who was against the Shahs when they were taking over, and his mom was for it because they were promising even more liberty and freedom and all this free stuff. It sounds kind of familiar to what we're going through today. And there was kind of a philosophical divide in his house on what should be happening. And then, of course, they got purged out and had to come to the United States. So to your point, it depends on what your algorithm is or who your personal contacts. You can find people that will tell you that there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands celebrating in streets around the world. And then there's tens of thousands that you can see mourning in the middle of, Iran and the main cities there. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. I think I'm going to surprise some of my conservative friends because I'm going to have a hands-off approach, wait and see on some of this, because it seems yes and no, good and bad to so many different questions. But I'm going to let you frame the conversation around Iran. How do you want to start it off? Where do you want the genesis of the conversation to go?
Let me start with this. Imagine a world in which Iran is not run by an Islamic mullah, basically a Muslim government that is radically anti-West, a Muslim government that is the state sponsor of terrorism in a lot of countries, that has sponsored most of the terrorism that we've seen in our lifetimes. The wave of Islamic terrorism that we've seen in our lifetimes basically started in 1979 with the revolution in Iran, and Iran's revolutionary government then started using oil revenue and the other money they have to sponsor Hezbollah and Hamas and a bunch of other terrorists around the world. And so without Iran sponsoring that, the world's a totally different place. The Muslim terrorists, the Islamic terrorist threat would be much, much less. So there's that. Just if you can just imagine what the world would be like. We've also basically been at war with that country since 1979 when they took the hostages and held 52 Americans for 444 days. In 1983, they killed, was it 222 or 23 Marines in Beirut?
Is that in 1983, you're talking about Marine barracks?
Marine barracks.
241.
241 yeah. Marines. I don't know why I had 220 in my mind. 241 Marines were killed when a Hamas terrorist drove a truck through the front gate. And we were so politically correct right back then that Marines on guard duty weren't allowed to have ammunition in their rifles. And so the guy was able to plow through and get to the Marine barracks. And then over time, they've continued to fund all of the terror in multiple different countries. And we've, as a world, have in some ways have been putting up with that. In some ways, oh my gosh, we've been helping them. The whole giving them sanctions relief and passing on pallets of cash under Obama, I think may have been one of the biggest geopolitical mistakes in the history of the planet, much less the history of the United States. We should have done something about this sooner. We just didn't politically have the will or the position to be there. Now, is there a violation of international law by us going to war against them? Well, it depends on what the statute of limitations is for hostile military acts allowing for a response. We can have that conversation. Is it morally the right thing to do? I'm on the side of 100% yes, Now, is it going to be a real challenge? Whether there's going to be a regime change that's going to make this a difference? Absolutely. And I hope we can get into that conversation. But the way I just want to frame this is they, the mullahs, the Khomeinis, the Ayatollahs who have been running Iran for since 1979 for almost 50 years are basically a major source of the evil on the planet Earth. They are part of the axis of evil, and I'm glad that they're going to be gone. I'm glad they're getting removed, and we as Americans should be celebrating that happening. Now, the finer details of what are we willing to sacrifice to make that happen? What are we exposing? Are we making America stronger or weaker? Let's talk about that, Clint.
Yeah, I kind of started off with Jeff saying a lot of what you just said, but I'll frame it in a very clumsy way, which I normally do. I am so yes and no to some of these things and good and bad to some of the same exact questions because I can make a case that because of what you said, like from 1979 or 1983 on, you got 1984 Beirut Embassy, you got 96 with the towers, you got 2003 to 2011 the Iraq War. They were sponsoring a bunch of third party terrorist groups to come in and fight back against us. You've got it happened in 2024. There was a drone strike on Tower 22. All of these different things. I got a list of them pulled up here. Plus the Death to America chanting. I saw two different videos. One was actually a podcast, but how people that came from Iran, and Patrick Baghdad was one of them, and there was, over the last 30, 40 years, you were taught as a child the chant of Death to America is when you start talking, that's what you're taught to say. And so I've gone back and forth listening to super liberals, super conservatives, people I trust on both sides. The concept of the two sides of the same coin, the concept of should we wait till the enemy is strong enough to actually act upon us? Okay, so they're not a threat right now, but we know they're going to be. They're trying. They're working on it. So we just wait till they are the threat, and then we do something. We fight the enemy when it's actually at more strength. Or how do we define immediate threat now? Trump says no new wars. Is this a war, or is it a military action? And he's got 60 days for the war power. What comes next? Trump mentioned 4 weeks. Are there people lined up? Is he challenging he said, this is your country. Iranians, get out in the streets, take your government over. Is he counting those people to be boots on the ground so we don't have to? There's all of these unknowns. And what I told Jeff was those old axioms, the proof's in the pudding, the devil's in the details, are true. So why don't we just say, I don't know how I actually feel about this right now. I want to see how it plays out. If it is another Iraq war, Trump's done. He's over. His presidency will be done. It'll be marred. I think he's got a plan. I don't think he's going to share it with us. It's crazy to think he hasn't told us exactly what the off-ramps are. No, he's not telling you. That's like saying you don't think he told China and Russia what he was about to do when he was doing it, or the big eight, around the world. So I think he has a plan. The flip side of it is if Vietnam was handled more strategically. If the war in Iraq had clear off ramps and we had a clear mission and it was handled differently, our perspective looking back on those things would have been way different. I am hoping Trump has learned lessons from those things and does have a plan and does have what a victory looks like for America. And when we're done, he can come out and say, this is what we knew. This is what we did. This is why we did it. This is how it's going to create stability. It's better. He said something in one of his talks. We're doing this for the future of our kids, not for us as much right now in the moment. And at some point in time in history, we gave up thinking like that. So again, I'm going to go back and forth. People may hear me talk about this going, he is for it. And then 10 minutes later, I may say something that sounds like I'm against it. I'm for some of it. I'm against some of it. I think that's the way all smart people should be because none of us know exactly what they know.
Let me start by one of the major differences. When people say we're making the same mistake we made in Iraq, we're making the same mistake we made in Afghanistan. And I think if you're saying that, I'm sorry, but I have to strongly disagree. I don't think you quite understand the geopolitics of this. And the big difference is that in Afghanistan, it was always a bunch of different warlords fighting each other, but there was no one historical ruling tribe that really we could get behind, that people would rally around. In Iraq, it was a made up country. It was made up after the First World War out of several different European colonies and Arab territories, and some Shia territories and some Kurdish territories. And it was just a mess, and it had been held together by various means. But it was, other than the dictatorship in Iraq, yeah, there just wasn't a unifying force. And once that fell, they didn't have a history of democracy. They didn't have a history of any kind of a different government. Iran is totally different from all that. Iran, historically Persia, is an empire with a history that goes all the way back to the day. It's in the Bible. Esther was the Jewish queen who stopped the Persian prince from having all the Jews killed when they were in the country of Persia, which is present day Iran. In fact, that holiday that celebrates the fact that the Jews were saved and not killed in Persia, that's taking place right now, Glenn. I believe it's today and tomorrow is the traditional Jewish holiday where they celebrate the Jews being saved in Persia. Persia is Iran. The people of Iran are Persian, that they are mostly Shia Muslims, which is very different than Sunni Muslims. There's only a very few handful of countries that are Shia, but they also have this history of the being it's Zoroastrianism is the historic religion. But the other big part of this is during the reign of the Shah of Iran, Iran was a fairly Western country. It was so westernized that you would see women in the 70s walking around in knee-high boots and mini skirts, and that was like a normal attire. That
Going to
was just,
school.
yeah, going to colleges and universities. It looked like it could have been a European country with the fashions of the day. The standard of living was pretty high. The Shah had some issues with corruption, but he also had some issues with repression. But a lot of the repression was to stop the Islamic jihadists from from taking over the country, which they ultimately did. And they did it, like you said a little while ago, the Islamic jihadists took over by basically saying, we're going to bring peace and freedom and maybe some more socialism in, and everybody's going to be happy. We'll get rid of this corrupt Shah. Well, the Shah, in comparison, was not that corrupt. There's a history of people being faithful to the Shah. There's also a history of, under the Shah, there was a parliamentary process. So another comparison to Iraq is, we went in with boots on the ground and then tried to impose almost a Western style republic or democracy on them. And they had no history of that. In Iran, it was within our lifetime, there was a time period where they had a stable government that had those kind of institutions. And there are people alive in Iran who can remember that. And there are young people that have been told by their families at home, this is what it could be here if it was a free country again, if we had those institutions back. All these people that somehow are able to pull out flags that have the old Iranian lion on them, that have been somehow hiding them the whole time. Think about what would have happened if somebody come in their house and searched their house and found that old flag from the Shah time period. They would have been killed. Well, they were willing to hold on to these flags and hide them in places. Now they're all coming out of the woodwork in Iran. So a huge, my bottom line is, a huge difference is, if the Ayatollahs can be taken out of power, there is a cultural direction here and a lot of people ready to buy into it, to bring back a stable form of government that has a history in Persia stroke Iran that didn't exist in Afghanistan and Iraq. So when people just say no nation building and it didn't work in Iraq, you're not, you just, that's basically just not an understanding of what is actually possible here. Am I saying for sure it's going to happen? No, I don't know. I haven't been in the Navy in 30 years. I haven't, I've been a lawyer helping people with disability stuff, but I've been paying a lot of attention to this, and I have a reason to care because I've got a high school friend who's part of this history. I've always been fascinated and interested in this. I just think people are not looking at it clearly or cleanly when they say it's not, that there's not a good chance the people of Iran could do something successfully and actually restore their country.
Well, let me jump in here because I think, again, what I'm saying is I hope Trump has learned his lesson. Everybody judges it, and I don't blame them. We judge it on the mistakes of the last 30, 40, 50 years when it comes to military conflicts. I personally think Trump has a better record than that. I think he's proven that he'll do things and then stop, or he has clear definitions. That's why I think he struggles with, and I said this about negotiations when I was talking to Jeff this morning. Listen, if I have a great track record, if I bet 70, 80% on negotiating, getting what I want or versions of what I want, whether it's through tariffs or military force or in developments in New York, around the world, I'm going to think I can fix problems anytime I want to. So when he says things like, I'll end the Russian Ukraine conflict day one, he was assuming that once he got in the real room with somebody, he could pull off what he's done. Same thing with when you get in with Iran. You go, okay, well, we've got all this stuff we've come to bear around your country. You saw what I did to Venezuela. You saw what I did to these other places. Yeah, you know it. But he doesn't understand sometimes, and I don't think you do till you get in the room. Some people don't care. They don't have common sense. They're leading with emotions. They've got ulterior motives, and sometimes it works. The most of the time I think he's done stuff, it's worked. These two times it didn't. But I want to ask you something real quick. The thing that I heard Jeff say, and this is one of those I'm in the middle on, and I'm mushy. I hold it against him, yet I also know things change because Clint and Eric and even people who are very smart don't know all the details. When you have Hegseth come out and Trump come out and say, we're not into nation building anymore, no new wars, we are not going to be the world's police anymore. Right here, no more regime change. I mean, Hegseth said that a couple of months ago, and all of a sudden you see these things. That is great fodder. This is why I think the administration, should be when Trump came out when he was running the first time and said the only reason Obama couldn't get anything done with Iran is because he sucked at negotiations. If you have to go to violence, and it's abomination or whatever he said. This is a frustrating part about this thing of the administration. They are so tough on things. And I think they're very clear on a lot of stuff. But when they're not good with their words, it sets us up to have conversations or they're distractions, but politically they have impact. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's very frustrating. How do you rectify the two things said from the pulpit of the White House versus what's going on in real life? I know what I think. I'd like to hear what you think.
I think Trump sometimes has diarrhea of the mouth. I think.
Yeah. Well, this was Hegseth too. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and Hegseth. Well, he's repeating what his boss repeated. I think there's a natural inclination for the people who were sort of the America First crowd to say, no more regime change, no more being the world's policeman, unless there's a fantastic opportunity that comes along that would totally change the world, and we can have the right thing at the right time. That's sort of the idea that's sort of implied. Let's take one step back. When President Obama was sort of the poster boy for this philosophy that everybody else in the world is enough like us, that if we can just have rational, reasonable conversations with them, if we can just negotiate with them, violence is never the answer. That there's always a way for reasonable people to sit down and solve problems. That we can negotiate with Iran, and if we give in a little bit, then they will give in to us. So if we send them $2 billion in cash and pallets on the back of a C-130 and another $148 billion in relief sanctions, well, they're going to like us after that, and they're going to be much more willing to negotiate. And his naivete was that those people don't think like that. They think that the United States is suckers for engaging in that. They use that money to fund terrorism and their nuclear weapons research, and they used it to further develop more missiles that could take out Israel and any of the other Arab countries that they don't like. So it was a total sucker move. In some ways, Trump has that same problem. Remember, he is a 1980s Democrat in some ways at heart. And so I don't know that he's quite the sucker in terms of understanding, like thinking if you give the other side something, then they're going to be nice and we're going to be able to negotiate. He's sort of got the opposite approach. I can be a hardline negotiator. I can really play the art of the deal with people, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're going to look to what their own advantage is and they're going to make a deal. And I think that's where Trump is naive. I think that's what he didn't realize, that Putin is a true believer, that Putin is not going to make the best deal that actually makes the most sense for Russia right now. Putin actually believes in expanding the old Russian borders, the Russian Empire, to having more elbow room with the West, and to basically have all the prestige and power that comes along with taking over as much of the territory around there as they could. And so he's not going to give in that because in the Ukraine it makes more sense to make a deal now. It makes sense from a rational person from Trump's point of view, and I think that's a big mistake Trump is making. But I think what Trump realizes is that there's times when The fact that he went into Venezuela and took out their leader, he knew there was no more negotiations, that was not going to work, and I think that was a sign. Now I think Trump maybe hasn't gone far enough in Venezuela, letting the next level take charge. He should have done something maybe to push them out further, but I think he's still keeping the pressure on. Leave Venezuela aside, I think he realizes in Iran that negotiations are not going to work. And he even were the most recent negotiations to try to get them to give up their missile program and their nuclear weapon program and to stop sponsoring terrorism around the world. Did that have any actual chance of succeeding, or was that just to buy
Well,
time while we move stuff into place? But it looks like Trump's game of playing of trying to negotiate. But at the end of the day, I think Trump realizes that there's certain times you just can't negotiate, but it took him a while to come around on Iran maybe, but on Putin, I think he still is making a mistake thinking the guy will negotiate.
Jeff asked me the question, do I think there was actually a way for negotiations to be successful? And I said, yeah, he brought all this, like I just said, he brought it all to bear. He was hoping they would deal with some sort of common sense, but they're not. They're fanatics. They're religious and governmental political fanatics. But this is what I told Jeff too. Yes, there was one way. It absolutely was one way this could have been peaceful for Iran to go, okay, here's our nuclear program. You guys are in charge of it. We might like some for energy. Can you help us? Here's all our centrifuge locations. We're laying down our arms. We understand that the next step is either we capitulate or we are going to be forced out. That was the way to do it. And he knew that. Trump knew that. And there was no movement. There was all these little rustling of the leaves, but the limbs in the tree wasn't going to come down. And I think he never, it's what he said last time when he did this in Iran with the 12-day conflict was, I don't know. We'll talk about it. We'll see how it goes. They have 10 days. And, 3 days later, he did what he did. I think he knew it would probably get here at some point. I think they knew this up front in the negotiations. But it doesn't mean you still don't try to the negotiations hoping you're wrong.
I
So,
don't I don't think they knew I think Trump knew there was no chance the negotiations were going to work, that they were essentially a ruse. Basically, remember what they were asking for. We were asking them to give up their nuclear weapons program permanently and totally. Their missile program, they were supposed to give that up substantially. They were still supposed to stop supporting international terrorism like Hamas and Hezbollah and all those other groups. And they were supposed to stop repressing their own people. And if they agreed to all those things, then everything would have been fine. We would not have attacked. We wouldn't have taken it further. But if they had agreed to all those things, they basically would have lost power. They would have lost so much face that they couldn't maintain power in the long run and maintain that agreement. The mullahs in Iran, the ayatollahs, knew that if they agreed to all that, that was essentially them rolling over on their back like the small puppy to the big dog, and would have eventually been taken out by their own people, and it would have caused that to happen. So there's no way that was going to work. It would have been great if it had, but then they also wouldn't have lived up to it, and then it would have been a problem too.
but here's the thing: if he had not given diplomacy a chance, what would everybody be saying now? See what I'm saying? That's what you have to do to make sure you've gone through the right things and done it the appropriate way.
I don't think some people look at this and say, okay, yeah, he tried.
Oh, Eric left. He's been having this issue, ladies and gentlemen. I kind of was prepared for it. So when he jumps back on, I'll let him finish. But my contention was when Eric was talking was that the reason that the negotiations had been going on so long was for two reasons. One, so Trump and them could plan, maybe put a second, other plans after the initial attack. And then the second part was because I don't think he had to check the box. He couldn't just go in. And Eric, if you're still out there, man, you need to log back in. And he couldn't just go in and randomly attack without going through the process of actually doing the negotiations.
I heard a guy named Neil Ferguson, who's a Scottish historian who works at the Hoover Institute and also is regularly a Free Press contributor, and he used the old Soviet Russia term Moskova, which is basically it's a sham. It was a sham negotiation.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Trump had no intent in the long run for this to work. That what it was buying time until
Yeah.
we could get everything into place and work out a plan with Israel for coordination, see how much we get the other Arab states to basically give us use of their airspace, all those kind of negotiations, and to prepare everybody to do it. With the negotiations Those that have the added benefit of a few people going, see, look, Trump negotiated. Well, maybe it did, but I think most people know it was all
No, but
Moskova. It was
politically, he had to do it. If he didn't do that, he had to do it politically, man. He would have been getting crucified. That would have been even worse.
well, he had to do it to a little, but it was just it was a show trial. It was like
That's
the
what I'm
China,
saying. I get it.
yeah,
I understand.
it,
Listen,
yeah.
and yeah, doing it means it was kind of ceremonial. But just between me and you, and we'll move on because this is not that big of a part of it. But can you imagine if he had just attacked with no negotiations? You didn't give diplomacy a chance. It would have been political craziness.
I no, I think the same critics would have they're going to be just as mad now. You didn't give diplomacy enough of a chance.
Well, I've got some
I
questions I got for you, but I want to make sure you get all your stuff out. My questions are going to come from conversations I had with Jeff.
So let me bring up a couple other points from stuff I've been listening to. I listened to
Yeah.
a guy. There's a podcast called Spectator Americano, which is the conservative magazine. Spectator is the conservative magazine in the UK. That's one of the oldest magazines on the planet. And they had a guest on their Americano podcast, which is the UK looking at all things American. And this guy he basically sounded like a neoliberal, a George Bush era conservative, and he basically was saying things like, well, this is a huge risk for Trump and it's probably going to fail. If we don't put boots on the ground, the Iranian people are not going to be able to rise up. That it's likely to be the end of his presidency. And one of the points he made, and this is one I want to address, was we know, and this is the we know because we're the experts in this whole geopolitical stuff, that air power can never make a difference. And I just want to. There's a couple other things he said, but
Jeff Stiles said that today too.
I just want to address that. World War II is calling and wants you idiots back. If you think air power can't make a difference now, it's a totally different planet. The problem we had, air power made some difference in World War II. We can historically negotiate, discuss, try to figure out how much did the bombing over Germany matter morally to their morale? How much did it matter in terms of actually slowing down their production? And the old argument is, well, as we were bombing the heck out of them with daylight bombing from the US and the British and other allies bombing them at night, they increased their total production. Yes, they did. But at the same time, we know from like the head of the Luftwaffe saying, I knew the war was over the first time I saw an American fighter over Berlin. Once we were able to send P-51 Mustangs to escort our bombers all the way over, and the chances of getting shot down as a bomber went way down toward the end of the war. Having said all that, we were dropping bombs from 25,000 feet, sometimes hitting rail yards and sometimes hitting cow pastures. What we now have the capability of doing for the first time in human history is precision missiles and guided bombs that can take out a particular room in a particular building. And the particular room in this case is where the Ayatollah was and some of his other leaders. And you put that hand in glove with the intelligence operations, the boots on the ground intelligence, and some of the other intelligence that the Israelis have going on. Footnote, why is our intelligence operations not that good anymore? But if you look at that level of intelligence operations and we're able to take out the leaders of a country that's teetering on the edge of revolution already, that people were willing to go out in the streets to the tune of 30,000 people being shot down, and yet they were still out there protesting for a while during all that time period, that you have a country that's that ready for a revolutionary change, and then you go decapitate it, you're looking at something different than Nazi Germany, where they were still a lot of true believers and they were just morally starting to maybe have some questions, but they fought that war to the end. What we're talking about is decapitating a country that's using repression to hold down a population ready for revolution. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to work, but it's a hell of a lot. It's an entirely different story than what happened during World War II. It's not a great comparison. It's very different from Iraq. Like I said a little while ago, we tried to impose a form of government on Iraq that was not historically something they were ready for. In Iran, there is a population of people who are ready for this to change. I think, just for comparison purposes, I think this would be similar to us, and maybe Marco Rubio convinces the president to do this too. We take out the leadership of Cuba, and the people there are going to rise up, and it's going to be a different country. Now, how long it takes to recover, how long it takes to become free again, or at least a place that has basic, rights and the rule of law a little bit. I don't know. We'll see what happens in Iran. Could see what happens eventually in Cuba, but the political pressure being put on them. My point is, there's just certain times when it's different. Not all things are the same. Not all uses of air power is the Memphis Belle dropping stuff on Munich.
That's what I was trying to explain to Jeff today too. A little bit was just like every headline, everything that we talk about has differences and nuances. And the last time that we think about when we went into Iraq after 9/11, the internet was not near as prevalent as it is now. I mean, I know it is, but the way we communicate is so different. Political pressures are so different. The world is so small now. And I've not heard a lot. I've heard condemnation from Russia and China, but I've not heard outright outrage yet. I know it's probably coming, but don't think we didn't go do this and talk to China and Russia beforehand behind backdoor channels, so they knew what was going on. They've got to say some stuff up front. I get that, but even pressure from their considered allies are going to be way different. We've already seen what's going on with other countries in the Middle East after Iran just starts throwing bombs around the Middle East, hitting, Saudi and all these other places. They're coming out now going, wait a minute, we were going to kind of remain neutral in this. Now you're throwing bombs at us. So we're going to put some pressure on you too from your neighbors. Now Pakistan is going to come to their defense, I'm pretty sure, which is not a great thing. But all that being said, that's what I was trying to explain it to Jeff, and that's what I was kind of talking about when I first started. If things had been handled differently in Vietnam and the Iraq war, we would look back on those conflicts and, yes, wars differently than we do now. But because there was no clue, we didn't have, I'll say it, because we didn't have anybody with real balls to say, this is what a victory looks like. It's going to be ugly, but it's going to do better for our kids. Your 10-year-old hopefully will grow up in a better, less scary world when he's 20 or she's 20 than you did. That to me is a big deal. Again, I'm still not saying I'm on board with everything because I don't know. But I think Trump is a president we have not seen before.
I'm probably more on board than you are. A couple other things just to think about politically and in the big picture. When you see the picture of the Iranian women taking off their hijabs and starting to walk around in street clothes, that they immediately change from being look like these Middle Eastern repressed women into proud women walking around in skirts above their knees and nice hair. And it's just that the fact that they're doing it immediately and over again. And it was just a few years ago that an Iranian woman was killed for showing a little bit too much hair, was arrested and beat to death in prison, and that led to some of the revolts. I think when you have the women of the population that much ready to rise up, my point is there's a difference here culturally behind the scenes than even Vietnam. That in South Vietnam, a lot of people didn't support the rulers of South Vietnam because it was so corrupt, and it allowed the Viet Cong to be able to recruit much more easily. What I don't know sitting here, and what I don't think most people know outside of the experts at the CIA and some people who really think about this, inside Iran, much of the population are true Islamic believers and support the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps or support the Ayatollahs, and how many people are basically secular people wanting to have a version of a free country under either a Shah or a parliament again. But with the protest we saw just a few weeks ago, I think it's a large population of people willing to rise up. You're seeing the Iranian diaspora all rise up. There's the literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world that got out of Iran that are waving the Iranian flags with the Shah's flying on them and ready to support Iran and maybe go back and help rebuild the country. I've heard through people talking about the crown prince and people wanting him to come back that there's actually a network of intelligence of people in Iran that are in the some kind of intelligence jobs that require intelligence. What I'm trying to say, they're doctors, they're in academia that are secretly risking exposure by communicating with the crown prince in America to say, when you come back, I'm ready to help do this. When you come back, we've got a group of people ready to support you in this. That kind of stuff is going on inside Iran, when it's being as repressed as it is a real sign of hope. So you got women rising up, people, who want to support the country all over the place.
Well, I agree with that. I do want to touch on two quick things. And you don't have to. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it because I know, still I've got a hard out in about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. But my question to you is, just yes or no, or give me your. It depends. Was Iran an immediate threat to the United States?
Ongoing and constant a threat to the United States.
Okay. These are two things, and then I'm going to ask you one about Congress and the War Acts. I think this is a big deal for me. Jeff did bring up something that was very frustrating. It made my insides want to come outside. When he was talking about the border, he goes, listen, I know the border was open and went 6 million or 20 million. And he goes, now there's people talking about sleeper cells. And I think they're here, but if nothing happens in the next few weeks, I think we can say that they're not here. And I go, dude, they could be waiting. The head of the snake's been cut off. They could be rogue actors like the one in Texas. I don't know.
They'll come out of the jungle in 40 years like those Japanese soldiers who never surrendered.
Well, but what frustrated me was now all of a sudden he's like, now listen, I know the border. I'm like, holy shit, man. For 4 years, there was a bunch of people smashing desks, putting their, smacking their hands on the tables going, what are you doing? And now all of a sudden it's like, I know it's a problem. So we'll see if it's true. I'll go in my opinion, this is I'm going to say something a little outrageous. Anything that happens in that world here in the United States, to me, is on the prior administration. And everybody on the Democrats did not stand up and demand that problem to be fixed from day one of the Joe Biden Democrat administration. That is on them. That is ridiculous. It is sad, and it was very frustrating to hear all of a sudden that come up as a possible problem. This goes back to the same thing with COVID, Russiagate, the Hunter laptop. Insert the lie that everybody swallowed here. Yes, no shit, Sherlock. That's what a lot of us have been saying when it was happening in real time and we were called racist.
So what you're saying, Clint, let me put that succinctly, is Trump shouldn't do anything about the terrorists coming from Iran because Biden already let a bunch of them in.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for summing that up. Let me get to the question I have for you, though. Not the question. The one thing that I brought up is there was this thing that we've always heard for 30 or 40, 30 years, we've heard Iran is 6 months away from having a nuclear weapon. What the other part of that argument is no one talks about is that, and I've just got dates pulled up, 2007 to 2010, from 21 to 24, 2010 to 2012, and I'll get somewhere in a minute. Starting in 1996 to 2002, there are these moments in time where Israel by themselves or Israel and the United States together have interfered via cyber warfare several times, assassinations. They've sabotaged facilities. They've bombed. They've done intelligence and hijacked information. And every one of those has set back the program a year here, 2 to 3 years there, 4 to 5 years here. But you never hear that. A lot of times you just hear, we've been hearing the same thing for 30 or 40 years. They never say the other side of that is right. And after about every year to 3 years, Israel or America does something to slow them down so they don't get there quicker. I'm not telling you that to believe one side or the other. I'm just saying the other side of the argument is, yes, you've heard that a lot. And about that same time, Israel infiltrated with Mossad and assassinate somebody, or they blow up a reactor, or they do some cyber warfare that cripples them for 6 months to a year. It seems like the setbacks have been in place every 2 to 4 years. Something happens. And I don't know if people actually realize that it's been an active, ongoing give and take on this whole conversation around nuclear weapons.
It would be so much better for the world for that to no longer be the case, for the Israel and the United States and anybody else to not have to do that constantly. If Iran somehow secretly built just 1 or 2 bombs, they could wipe out the entire country of Israel. Almost 1 or 2 bombs. It's a small enough country that it doesn't take a whole lot of nuclear weapons to kill the last major Jewish population in the world to basically, reproduce the Holocaust with 1 or 2 bombs. So that's the risk. That's why it's so scary.
Well, they were working on ICBMs too
And ICBMs to shoot it over
for
the
us. Yeah.
right, and the key, or you're right, shoot the missiles even farther to Europe or even to the United States. So, but even just building 1 or 2 bombs that Iran somehow figures out to sneak into Israel, either by a missile, by dropping from a plane,
Dirty
or
bomb.
God forbid, put it in the back of a Jeep and somehow get it into Israel, sneak it in. That's the great fear, and that's why they had to be stopped. And then the other problem that was ongoing is Israel can't keep doing it alone politically because the rest of the world will hate them if they're doing it on their own. They'll be told they're not allowed to act like that. When the United States is working with them, we can do a lot of stop Iran and maybe take out the nuclear weapons system before it gets put in place. The next time a president like Obama is in charge, he will stop Israel from being able to do it, and he'll reward somebody like Iran by giving them $150 billion so they can build a better bomb. So
And say, we'll check on you, but we're only going to check on you for a couple years. After that, you're on your own.
after that, you're on your own, and then Israel is totally screwed because then they're totally exposed to this country that it says death to the little Satan Israel over and over again, and wants to drop a bomb on them, and they can't stop them because there's no one to politically help them out in the world.
Then it's death to the big Satan.
Yeah, and then it's
which is us.
death to the big Satan after they take out Israel. But after they take out Israel, it's too scary as it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to stop them, that needed to have happened, and that's why this is a bull. Well, we would have just kept taking them down. Well, what happens the next time a Democrat's in the White House and thinks Iran is, we can suck up to them by giving them more money to fund their nuclear program?
Because money's fungible, and if you say you want, they promise and wink at us. We're not spending it on that. We're spending it on something else. Well, okay.
Yeah, that was bullcrap. But then the idea that, well, we'll monitor them for 5 years, and then after that, they're on their own. Well, that was basically giving them absolute permission to start building nuclear weapons at some point.
All right, 2 quick things. I know we want to get to Newsom in a minute, but one, can you spend a little time on us or helping us, because you're the Constitution guy, and this frustrates me too because I've heard this. He didn't go to Congress. Neither did Bill Clinton, and neither did Obama. And Obama did strikes out the ass. Obama killed a bunch of civilians. He killed American citizens without due process. Again, I'm not telling you to you can go research it yourself. They didn't go before Congress. If I'm not mistaken, I get to say something out loud. My friend Eric, take it over for a few minutes and explain it to us. And then in a minute, we're going to run to the Newsom thing. But he can do this. This is he can do what he did. And then he's got 60 days to take it before Congress. Am I correct, or am I completely ass-backwards on that one?
Oh,
Backwards is a word, by the way.
Is it 60 days or 120 days? I can't remember. The Congress passed a law that put that time limit on the president. And so historically, when the Constitution was written, we didn't have to worry about a threat coming over the horizon from the bad guys. We couldn't send bombers from South Dakota to Tehran and back in one day. You could, so the idea back when the Constitution was first written was Congress would declare war. They would have time to debate it because it took so long to move troops and organize an army and prepare for defense. But if there was a surprise invasion, of course, the president could act to repel the invasion, call out the army, call out the National Guard, call out the militia. If somehow the British or the French or whoever it was snuck over the horizon and landed in Maryland and we didn't know it was coming, then of course the president can call people out. Well, that basically worked until World War II. We declared war in World War II. And what was the coincidental thing about the end of World War II with the last time we declared war? The beginning of nuclear weapons. We have not, no one's declared, the United States has not declared war since the beginning of nuclear weapons. And so there's this historical idea that the president always had emergency powers to do something. He was the commander in chief of the military. He could go solve these problems. Well, now we're in a much faster acting world. Russians can send missiles over the horizon. Congress doesn't have time to declare war before the president tells the nuclear missile command to fire back, or the nuclear missile command doesn't know to fire back under certain circumstances, or to launch whatever kind of retaliation we can launch if that happens. So all of those things are what changed in the second half of the 20th century. And so now we're at this point where presidents of both parties have acted without the permission of Congress, without really, and sometimes consulting Congress to act militarily. Congress along the way passed a law, and my brain is just not working. It's the what is the name of it? I could, is it's they have 60 days. The president can act for 60 days or 90 or 120 days, but whatever it is, basically the weapon that Congress has is they basically withdraw funding for the military for ongoing operations. That's the power that they have under the Constitution, and the president after that can't really continue to act. I will say this, Clint, that if within 60 days the Iranian people have not made tremendous progress toward overthrowing the Ayatollahs and the other aspects of the Iranian Revolutionary Islamic State, then Trump's probably politically in trouble
That's what I
anyway.
said. The midterms were gone at that point.
If it takes more than 60 days, the more
He
interesting,
said 4 weeks.
yeah, the more interesting constitutional question is, are we okay with the president exercising this kind of power and essentially starting a war with a foreign country without getting the authorization of Congress either up front or eventually? And the answer is, maybe it would be better if we lived in a better world where you didn't have to do that, where things didn't have to happen right away.
But
But Korea, we had to send troops over right away before South Korea was totally overrun, and we almost didn't make it. The Pusan perimeter, the last place that there were American and South Korean troops, was pretty freaking tiny. It was one
well,
one city, one port surrounded before we got enough troops over there. In Vietnam, we had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution where Congress passed basically something saying we're authorized to go over there. That was almost a declaration of war. But Iran, Iraq, Iraq, Afghanistan, the
all the
Gulf
the
War,
drone strikes and stuff in
yeah,
Syria, and
yeah, all of these have
bombarded.
gone through a different process than a regular declaration
Well,
of
I
war.
want to kind of move on because I do have a little bit of a heart out. But to your point, it's the 1973 Wars Act. They've got to
War
tell
Powers
Congress
Act,
within
yeah.
48 hours of introducing armed forces to hostilities, 60 days to get before Congress. So, he's within the 48 hours. He did it within 48 hours, and he's got 60 days to get it before Congress.
Yeah, it's called the War Powers Act, right?
It is called the under the War Powers Resolution.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
1973. Hey, let's jump over to this other topic, and I got one more question. And if we got time, I'll ask you. Deep breath, everybody. We're going to shake our heads and go over to this. We'll spend about 10 minutes on it. I don't think it'll be very long because I'm actually doing a sales training here in about 20 minutes that I've got to be leading. But I kind of watched a lot, not a lot. I watched more than just the quote of the interview on a podcast and on a speaking engagement interview with Gavin Newsom, who's the current governor of California, where he said some pretty I don't know. I think it's pretty racist stuff, but to me, it goes right along with what the Joe Biden said and what everyone else has said about Mitt Romney along the ways. I'll let you kind of set it up because you kind of just saw the story recently, didn't you? Did you not, Eric?
I heard about it over the weekend, and I heard some podcasts talking about it. And what I'm trying to figure out in the big picture of what happened. So the setup is that Gavin Newsom was on a book tour. His memoir, Young Man in a Hurry, he was on a stage at the Rialto Center in Atlanta talking to Mayor Andre Dickens, who's the mayor of Atlanta, who happens to be African American, in front of a live audience. What he said was, "I'm not trying to press you. I'm just trying to press upon you that I'm like you and no better than you, I'm a 960 SAT guy, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, but trying to act act all there if you got a 940, but literally a 960 SAT guy. You've never seen me read a speech because I can't read speeches. Maybe the wrong business to be in." So one of the immediate responses on the internet was to say that he's talking down to a black audience. And if he's immediately saying, "Well, I'm like you, I'm stupid, I got a low SAT score and I can't read," how racist is that to say that to a black audience? It's maybe even worse in implication than the if you don't vote for me, you ain't black from Joe Biden, because it is a direct implication that I'm like you, I'm stupid because all black people are stupid. That was the accusation. And then one of the defenses that's come out from more reasonable people is, well, if you look at the audience, there were white people in the audience. It was a mixed race audience. You can see that there were African Americans and see there was white people. It's Atlanta, Georgia. It's 40%, 40 something percent African American. And so there's likely to be a mixed audience of people who would support or want to hear Gavin Newsom speak. My real question is, Why the hell would anybody want someone to be their governor, much less run for higher political office like president, if he can't freaking read a speech and he got a 960 on the SAT? How is that good
Well,
news?
that would explain his success in California. That kind of nails it for me. I mean, he's not very bright, and I think California's been run like shit.
Let's all go watch the movie Idiocracy. That's what's going on here. It's now a good thing to be an idiot. It's now that's eventually our leaders are all going to be people who didn't even get an average score on the SAT, and somehow this country is going to be a better place. What their job's going to be is just to pander to the people who are going to vote for them, and they give away whatever they can until society collapses. What a great idea! That's what I really don't understand. Why is this something to brag about? Is he trying to like identify with the black people by saying I'm as stupid as you are? Well, maybe not, but that's what the accusation was. But so what instead is he doing is saying to the American voter, I'm pandering to you, American voter, because I'm a dumb guy too.
Well, I saw a couple things. First of all, this is you lay this alongside Biden saying Obama was articulate and first, but all these things he was complimenting Obama like he doesn't know many other black people who are articulate and smart. You're going to put you back in change. You're not black if you don't vote for me. All those things that I think are raised. The taco comment from, was it Kamala or Hillary Clinton? I can't remember. That it's all the racist stuff that they project onto other people because to be honest with you, there's racists on both sides. Human beings have the tendency to segregate amongst tribes and clans and all that. Not good, but it's the truth. It happens. But on the flip side, I would like to give Gavin Newsom the olive branch you were doing. I saw it. I went and had a knee-jerk reaction. And it could be him strictly as a politician trying to relate to his audience. Saying like, hey, you know what? I am the common man. I am the common person. I'm not up here in a place saying I am, air quote, better than you. But I agree with you. Then if that's what you're trying to say, listen, I can relate to the common person, even though he can't. He grew up doing pretty well for himself. But I can relate to the common man. I don't feel I'm any better than you. You can say that without saying I'm stupid like you are. I'm dumb like you are. I relate to the lowest common denominator because that's not empathy, that's sympathy. You're in the middle of it and that's not what I need from you. You're just told me you're not very bright. If I were running in California, I would take that clip on one half and on the right-hand side, I would simply have every failing policy running on text right beside it in a column of everything he has done that has cost California money or jobs or political clout. I would have that on a loop. I'm a 960, I can't read. I'm a 960, I can't read. And I would just have every policy that has failed. That would be my campaign ad right there. Because he just basically told you the reason California is run like crap is because I'm not smart enough. I'm a great politician, but I'm not a smart leader or decision maker. And I think we saw the opposite from DeSantis, who I think is not a great politician. He's good, but he's not a great politician, but he's a great decision maker and leader. Those are, to me, polar opposites of what you get when you're talking in the leadership we have today.
The other irony about Gavin Newsom is that he has connections to some of the richest families in California, and he comes from a very privileged background. And for him to then turn around, the way he's going to identify with the common person is to say, "You dumb voters out there, I'm as dumb as you are." This
is like them trying to say, Biden had a stutter, and all of a sudden when he was dealing with dementia, well, now we're making fun of him stuttering. Well, he wasn't stuttering for 30 years. This is the same thing for him. He's smart enough to get elected. All of a sudden you're telling me that you've got to try to somehow dumb yourself down to relate to people. I'm like, whatever, man. You can't go on one podcast and say you read books all the time and tell everybody that you've run we're the third largest economy in the world. Whatever he says, look how good we've done when the reality it's gone to crap. And then you don't get it both ways, in other words.
Yep.
You just don't get it both ways. Hey, can I ask you a quick question about Israel before we leave? I got to walk out of this room.
Sure.
Okay. I've heard this from so many podcasts, and I'm going to beg you to keep it to about 2 minutes, and then you can give your recommendations. I have heard that America does the bidding of Israel. I've heard it on Candace Owens. I've heard it on Tucker Carlson. It has been shared by many of my friends who I respect, that this conflict is driven by and that Trump is a puppet of Israel. Now, Trump, I thought, was a puppet of, at first, China and then Russia, and now he's a puppet of Israel. He barely has no brain of his own, which I'm saying that sarcastically. What does my friend Eric think about when someone says that Trump is being led around by the nose? This is an Israel war that Trump has just been drug into, and he has basically has no authority to make any decisions.
That's an anti-Semitic trope. I'm tired of people. As soon as you said Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, I'm like, those guys have gone so over the top, radically crazy left anti-Semite that I no longer respect either one of them. I don't consider them to be within the Overton window, right, yeah, of reasonable conversation. Now, other people are like, okay, why do we always align ourselves with Israel? Well, for one thing, we of the Christian faith in America, which is a lot of us, or at least traditionally, it's really the Judeo-Christian ethic. It's the Holy Land. It's where Jesus came from, and the Old Testament, a big chunk of it takes place in what is now modern day Israel. We have an affinity with the Jewish people. They've been part of America going back to before the Revolution. George Washington wrote a famous letter to the Jewish congregation in Rhode Island during the American Revolution. We've always had a close relationship with them. We also recognize they're basically the only democracy in the Middle East.
That's stable. The one I think, yeah.
That's those two things added together is a tremendous bonus. Traditionally, there's also been the idea there's a large Jewish population in the United States, so it's been politically a good idea to support them. Okay, that's political expediency. I just think it's morally the right thing to do. It's a country that, between being tied to us religiously, culturally, having similar cultural freedoms that we have, being either a free democracy / republic in the Middle East, all those things added up. Does it help in a situation like this that we can work together with them? Absolutely. Are we doing this because they're sticking their hands up the butt of the president and treating him like he's a Muppet? No, absolutely not. I think we just happen to be aligned on this. I think bottom line is the world's a better place if Iran is not run by radical Islamist mullahs that are supporting radical Islamic terrorism around the world and trying to build nuclear weapons that they can use to terrorize the world even further. The world's going to be a better place if Iran becomes somewhat of a stable, free country again that might even eventually become an ally of the United States again.
Do you have recommendations for us today, sir?
I do, very quickly. You can go to find this one on YouTube or on the Free Press's app or website. Neil Ferguson, America, This War is in Your Interest. Neil Ferguson's the Scottish historian I mentioned earlier, who also works at the Hoover Institute. He's written several good books, but he goes through in much more detail than I do about why geopolitically this war could turn out to be a game changer in the world and make the world a better place.
I think everybody should go listen to the PBD podcast. I love Patrick Bet-Davis. They cover a lot of, or David, they have a lot of podcasts. They cover a lot of topics, but I know for a fact that the next couple of days, a lot of his show will be on the Iran war, conflict, what everybody wants to call it. But I would recommend that one. I've enjoyed his podcast. He's very good. You'll have a lot of smart people on there. He has anybody on those podcasts, but he does have people that make me, like I said, look emotionally stable, which will drive somebody like Eric absolutely insane.
I have one last recommendation, Clinton. Okay. We get out of here. You're going to have people go to PBD. I'm also going to tell people to look for PDB.
Okay.
President's Daily Briefing podcast is a guy who's a former CIA officer, and he has about a 25-minute podcast that basically, this is what I would put into the President's Daily Briefing each day for a general audience. And he has he gets down to the brass tacks pretty quickly about the facts of the war or the facts of whatever's going on each day. So that's my other recommendation for a podcast to follow.
You can find all of my podcasts and Eric's podcast at nougapodcast.com. Podcast is plural, nougapodcast.com. Eric, I got to get out of here, buddy. See you, man.
Great job. Good seeing you, Clint.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.